Well, folks, it is about 4 o'clock in the morning. You know, I had to jump in front of the camera for this one, so we're going to be talking about episode 7 of The Mandalorian season 3. It just finished airing on Disney Plus. If you haven't seen it as it's been airing, there are going to be spoilers in this. You have been warned. Before we get into it, though, a quick note. Last episode wasn't everyone's favorite. I know this because I said very positive things about it. Turns out it was a little more divisive. One of the things that has been an issue that I want to address right now with season 3 of The Mandalorian has been the fact that it's taken a long time to really establish what is going on. And while the overarching theme regarding, the rise of the First Order sort of coming into play a little bit, setting up the things that we see eventually in episodes 7 to 9, and also seeing the story continue with the other Mandalorians, there is definitely some base, but it can feel a little disjointed, and it took a little too long in times to get to something that we wanted to see, which is sort of like a plot direction. However, both seasons before this have also had a similar situation where there's a couple of episodes that happen towards the ending that really managed to cement the whole thing and bring it all together. Case in point, Episode 7. So after the end of Episode 6, you had all the Mandalorians finally come together under Bo-Katan. She has the Darksaber now, so you're basically expecting something pretty epic to go down. And right from the opening scene, you get that. You once again see that one Imperial lady, Katie O'Brien, the actress, and she's talking to Moff Gideon, Giancarlo Esposito, and it turns out he's perfectly fine, but he's working with other Imperial officers and other major people who are still working in the shadows of the failed Empire to try and rebuild. And one of those turns out to be Hux. General Hux, as you're going to get to know him, played by Donald Gleason. In the show, he's not played by Donald Gleason, but you see a younger version of him, and there's conversations going around regarding something that he's building, which eventually we find out is stuff like Starkiller Base and stuff like that. But seeing those little puzzle pieces set up is really, really cool. They also talk in name about Grand Admiral Thrawn, which we do know is happening. We know he's played by Lars Mikkelsen now, thanks to Star Wars Celebration. Whenever we get to see him, that'll be pretty cool. But the Mandalorians are finally moving on Mandalore. They're trying to reclaim it once and for all, and a big army has been amassed by Bo-Katan, and as they move in, things seem to be fine. And you get an episode for a while that's setting up the stage for things. You have them eventually come down there. There's some survivors left from the Night of a Thousand Tears and all of that, stuff that went down prior to the bombings on Mandalore and the Purge. And eventually those survivors are like, well, we stayed on because we believed you would come back for us. And eventually Bo-Katan has, but it turns out that there was a whole deal involved when it came to stuff like, Moff Gideon getting the Darksaber. But now that that has been rectified, there is hopefully an opportunity here in order to be able to finally take back Mandalore. And when they're interrupted by a creature while on their way to the Great Forge, which is barely a thing that's left anymore, these new Beskar alloy troopers that are under Moff Gideon come in and they start to attack. And it leads to a very big action sequence that takes place where you basically see, the Mandalorians that we've come to know for a while now, some of the people from season 2, players that we've known for a while now, including Paz Vizsla, who I'll talk more about in a second. You get to see all of them finally taking on these forces. It turns out to be a part of a bigger ambush because Moff Gideon has finally decided to move in on the Mandalorians after gaining the threat from and the intel from his other officers that they're amassing together, and it's a threat that needs to be taken out once and for all. When you get to Moff Gideon, I love the fact that you get to that point where there's this Dark Trooper uniform that he has. I know about the Dark Troopers. The Dark Troopers have been there for a long time. You know, to see sort of a new and improved Beskar alloy Dark Trooper, basically indestructible, that is going to give the Mandalorians, it's going to give them some difficulties for sure. To see that play out, really interesting. I'm excited to see that finale episode, but this episode does unfortunately say goodbye to someone, and that is Paz Vizsla. In order to be able to get out of a situation where the Mandalorians have been trapped and they could all be purged instantly, one thing that happens is that Paz Vizsla stays back to shoot down the other troopers, manages to take them out, but then 3 Praetorian guards come through, and they eventually end up killing him, at least defeating him. I don't know. half the time in Star Wars you survive all kinds of things, but I think he's out of the game, which was really a really sad sight. You know, even though we didn't have tons of time with him as a character over these 3 seasons, it still managed to leave enough of an impact that you do feel bad about his passing. And I think that, you know, seeing the Praetorian Guards, this is the early iteration of them. We do see a version of them in The Last Jedi. If you remember, those are the guards that Rey and Kylo Ren fight. So that's cool. You know, it's nice to see those things come together. But this episode is one of those that really brings it all together. It's very similar to season 1, where for a while you were kind of going back and forth on what was going on. Yeah, there were some through lines here and there, but it took until episode 7 to really pick up and become this stronghold of an episode. And in that one, it similarly ended with Moff Gideon having the upper hand for a little bit, and then eventually we'll see what happens in this episode 8, but they got out of that, even though it took a lot along the way. I am very curious to see how that finale is going to go. I'm sure a lot of people are excited, but a lot of folks have been a bit up and down when it comes to this season, but I think it's coming together. I'm optimistic about the finale. I'm optimistic about the whole story coming together, and I think it has. I think episode 7 does a good job of taking those little strands that were not quite going anywhere and eventually now just being like, okay, here's what's going on. And I am so excited to see that. I want to know what you guys think of this episode, though. Oh, I forgot to mention, IG-11 is back, sort of, as IG-12, and now he can be controlled by someone who's inside it. So it's one of the Babu Frick, species that it is. And then Grogu is controlling it now. And Grogu can understand, so when Din first sees that and goes, no, get out of that, it's like, no, 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 yes. And I think it's the voice of Taika Waititi still, which is pretty cool. But I like that particular inclusion of it. I thought it was really, really nice. All in all, great episode. Fantastic episode. One that I'm sure a lot of people love, and I'm sure I hope a lot of people enjoyed. And it does somewhat smoothen out some of the negatives when it comes to this season overall. Whether or not I'm going to love the season as a whole by the time we're done, we'll see. But this is a great turning point. You know, it again, very similar to season 1 in that way, structurally speaking. And I'm curious to hear what more you guys think about it. So leave your thoughts in the comments down below. Let me know. Curious to hear everyone's, you know, opinions and theories regarding how things are about to progress. We already know what happens in the rest of Star Wars, but I'm talking about in terms of the Mandalorians. And let me know what you guys think. Guys, thank you very much for watching. Look forward to more reviews very, very soon. As always, if you like this, please do subscribe, and may the Force be with you.